a song called Wildflower And Barley, which was written in the pandemic and trying to make sense of lockdown conditions. Ireland, there's a lot of poets from Ireland whose work, as I've grown older, I've come to gain a deeper appreciation for it, a deeper appreciation for the land, as it were, the land that I come from. The way Seamus Heaney writes about the tactile nature of ground in, you know, collections of poetry, Opened Ground, his series of poems about bog bodies, punishment, the Grabble Man. You know, he writes all of these fascinating ways. He describes the way that he describes the ground, the way that he describes the soil. My goodness, one of his translations, I'd have to pull it up, but he refers to, you know, the ground as the goddess, that swallows our love and terror. I'd have to pull up that poem and read it. It's really dark, but yeah. So there's that. Then there's also a significance to the ground in some of our kind of songs that are like cultural, like of cultural importance in Ireland, I guess. So Wildflower and Barley references obviously barley, but if you're familiar with the folk song The Wind That Shakes the Barley, which that famous Cillian Murphy film is named after, it's a Ken Loach film. If you haven't seen it, I recommend watching it. If you're a Cillian Murphy fan, watch it. If you're interested at all in Irish revolutionary history, watch it. It's also just an excellent film. The Wind That Shakes the Barley is a folk song. Yeah, the film is named after a folk song that reflects upon the mass graves of that revolutionaries were buried in. So Croppy Boys that are referenced in Butchered Tongue on this album. Actually, Seamus Heaney has a poem about these guys called Requiem for the Croppies, which is worth listening to. So the Croppies, or the Croppy Boys, were men with short hair. They were called Croppies because they cropped their hair, which was the style of young men who sympathized with the French Revolution at the time of 1798. So around 1798. And so if you had short hair, if you had short cropped hair in 1798, you were a young man, chances are you could be just dragged in and you could be pitch capped. Your head could be torn off you. Your sort of scalp could be torn off with hot tar, this thing called pitch capping. And you might have an ear chopped off. If you survived the pitch capping, they'd take your ear off so that you couldn't just wear a hat and hide your identity in the future. So that's what Butchered Tongue is referencing. In the ears were chopped from young men. The pitch cap didn't kill them. In cultural memory, those revolutionaries, they were these kind of guerrilla ambushers. They lived in forests and they moved quickly, and they slept in greatcoats, these big outdoor coats, and they kept in their pockets barley oats, so they could just eat raw barley oats as they moved and as they traveled. So in the cultural memories, when all of those men were buried in mass graves, the image that lasts is you can tell where they were buried based on these unusual growings of barley. So that in the landscape there were these patches of barley that just appeared in the wake of that revolution, and that barley began to represent the part of the revolution that's unkillable, that which cannot be buried. And the soil in that is significant. The ground is significant you know, and there's, I think in that lyric in Wildflower and Barley, referring to trying to feel useful in lockdown, how to best conduct ourselves now for the benefit of lives in the future, let's say, in a time like that where you're kind of, there's all these questions. I think the lyrics are, it's going to take me a moment to recall them. This year I swear it will be buried in actions. This year I swear it will be buried in words. Some close to the surface, some close to the casket. I feel as useful as dirt. Put my body to work. So it was this kind of love song, but that also at a time when everybody was stationary and static and useless in a time of such crisis. I feel as useful as dirt. And I think there's also some part of that song is just trying to recognize the usefulness of dirt, the usefulness of soil, in that which facilitates the growth of something that cannot die, of something that is perpetual, will always come back, will always grow, that facilitates the renewing of a new generation, facilitates the renewing of a new world, that facilitates, in the words of those lyrics in First Time, facilitates creation, fighting off, like all creation, the absence of itself.